Well, welcome everybody to our very first ever Lessons Learned for Military Transition. I want to thank I call them guinea pigs, but really they're my guests, right? So thank them. Thank you to Charlie and Dawn for joining me today and trusting me that this is going to work. So if you are listening or watching us live on LinkedIn, throw us a comment, a like, let us know you're there, just so we know that we are actually broadcasting live. And so I am really thank you for tuning in. My name is Lori Norris. I am the host of the Lessons Learned for Vets podcast. That podcast is your support resource for all things related to the military transition process. So I've been serving the military transition and veteran community since 2005 through education and support resources. I'm a civilian, but I call myself bilingual because I speak the language of the military. And I am here to teach veterans how to market themselves in the job search process. So I want to introduce to you my guests, my brave souls that have joined me today live. So my first guest is Charlie Martinez. Charlie served 7 years in the Air Force with a focus on human resources. After separating from the Air Force in 2020, he's worked in talent acquisition and recruiting for both large and small companies. He is currently recruiting for Siemens, and though he lives here in the greater Phoenix area where he and Dawn and I are freezing to death today, he is supporting recruiting efforts in the Pacific Northwest. Charlie, welcome. I'm so happy that you're here.
Thanks so much for having me, Lori. I really appreciate it.
You guys have both joined me in person live at Luke Air Force Base, but it's a little less intimidating. I don't know why. It's the people that are watching us. So, okay. So last but not least, I want to welcome Donald Thompson. So Don retired from the Air Force after a career focused in HR, training, and recruiting. He had a smooth transition right into a role as a talent advisor for the Intel Corporation. We're bringing the big names today, Intel and Siemens. Though on the surface, his transition looked pretty smooth, pretty seamless. Like he might have hit the easy button, right? So he's here to share some of the lessons that he learned with us. So Don, welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you so much, Lori. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you.
See, this is the exciting thing is that Richard just said hello from Germany, and Julian said hello from Colorado, which he thinks we're wimpy. Both of them probably think we're wimpy, that we're freezing and it's 50 degrees outside, but we're zonies. We can't help it. So we could have never had Richard and Julian join us if we were doing this at Luke Air Force Base. So as I said in my post, this was kind of inspired by something I used to do at Luke Air Force Base. I would sit there live in front of an audience with a panel, and Charlie and Don were both nice enough to join me on that panel. And really, we were just there to share our lessons. And everybody's lessons are different. And I really wanted to kind of create a live version of the Lessons Learned for Vets podcast. And we are going to be launching season 3. I can't even believe that, tomorrow. And just to kind of celebrate that, I thought we would do a live stream to kick off that next season. So I'm going to launch off with my first lesson. And I know that anybody who's ever listened to an episode of the show is not going to be surprised that my first lesson is focus. I think that I say that word at least once in every episode. And I would say the biggest mistake in the military transition is a lack of focus, is that you don't know what you're looking for. And if you don't know in your military transition what job you're looking for, what direction you want to go, it makes writing the resume, creating a LinkedIn profile, building a good, solid, targeted network, it makes it so difficult. And so I always talk about it like fishing, right? So if you go out fishing in the Pacific Ocean, it's a really big place. There's a lot of different fish there. And if you just say, I'm going to go catch a fish, and you don't know what kind of fish you want to catch, you're going to struggle. What bait do you take? What tackle do you take? What direction do you go? I mean, you're going to come back from the fishing in the ocean and say, there's no fish in this dumb old Pacific Ocean. We all know that's not true, right? And just like if you come out of job hunting and you say nobody's hiring, we all know that's not true either. Right? So we know that it is a challenging job market in a lot of sectors out there, but there are still a lot of people hiring. I bet both of you, because both of you are in the talent acquisition space, can verify that you have openings, right?
Plenty.
Yes.
Right? So you've got to know where you're headed. So I just want to give you a tool today to start thinking about what you want to do next, right? So you got to start asking yourself questions like, do I want to work indoors? Do I want to work outdoors? Do I want to work with people? Do I want to work with equipment or machines? Do I want to travel? How many hours do I want to work a week? Do I want to work in person? Do I want to work hybrid, remote, right? So how much money do you need to make? These are all questions you've got to start asking yourself. And I want you to think of like concentric circles, 4 concentric circles. Let me see if I can paint this picture for you. At the top is your values and preferences. So what do you want to do? What do you like to do? Right? So that's your first circle. The next circle is your marketability, right? Does the world need this? Is it a skill? Is it a job that's out there that the world needs, right? So those are kind of your research into the career, into the skills. The next circle is your salary needs, right? Everybody needs to make money. You got to figure out how much you need to make, right? And so your marketability is important, okay? And then the last circle is your transferable skills, right? Do you have the critical skills you need? And that in the middle, that sweet spot where those 4 concentric circles overlap, that's your sweet spot. That's what you're looking for. You've got to bring all of that together. And so I'm a big advocate for starting this process early, like 12, 24, as long out as you can, right? I mean, if I had my way, we would start talking about military transition at about the 4th year in the military, to everybody, even if they're going to stay in for 30 years. We should start talking about it early because we've got to strategically plan for that. And so I really want you to start thinking about this and doing your research so that you can get your focus, so you can know where you're headed, so that you can really have a smooth path out of the military. So that's my number 1 lesson. So I want to kick it to you, Charlie, and just kind of get your sense on what I just said about focus. I want to hear your input on that, and then let's hear your biggest lesson.
Yeah, I think focus is a really big thing, right? As a talent acquisition professional, I get a lot of curiosity and interest in what we're having to offer, not only at Siemens but just within the military community in general. And sometimes I can't gain or gauge a sense of focus and really understanding of where that person wants to be. I found myself in that scenario as I transitioned myself until I really figured out, okay, this is the exact direction that I want to take, and here's what it's going to take to get to that point. So I think focus is one of the biggest factors. And even though, Lori, I think your points are, I don't want to say they're light, but they're very practical. And sometimes the practical things that we don't think about that are just, we're just going through the motions, you actually really do have to sit there and think about that, right? A financial reassessment based off of the benefits that you're getting. Where do you want to go? Okay, well, wherever you want to go, maybe that's going to extremely or limit extremely your opportunities in regards to your job that you're interested in within a specific industry and different aspects like that. So I think the focus is really important. And doing so and identifying that early on, I think, is important as well, which kind of brings me into my point, right? And mine are a little bit more specific in regards to my personal experience going through, transition. But as I reflected beyond our first meeting, I thought to myself, I think it would be great to explore early on, right? So kind of could be even that phase when you are exploring and trying to identify your focus. Well, when you're exploring, you really don't know what you don't know. And a lot of preconceived notions that you might have about specific industries or specific jobs, or you might have heard this or heard that through the grapevine. Okay, well, you may think that being a project manager is the perfect identity for you post-military, but You're really focused on that because you haven't found your focus, and you also maybe haven't explored any other options if you haven't come to that point already, right? I get a lot of interest in general from folks out there in the military community who automatically have that preconceived notion that because they supervise teams, that project management is just the best direct route for them to go. Well, there's so many different aspects to that in regards to identifying where you want to go until you find out what you don't know, right? And that's the important piece that I think is really it should be emphasized throughout that exploration process is getting out there, talking to folks, researching industries. I mean, if you don't know about a specific industry, like Siemens is very specific, for example, right? If that's something that interests you and could potentially go into your background, yet you weren't considering that because you thought you had to go the project management route because that's the best thing for you might want to think again. You might want to explore those industries or different career pathways, different types of jobs that you would have no idea about. And on top of that, this kind of brings me into a point that I'll share later on in the podcast, but that goes into really identifying what your strong skill sets are and the different types of skill sets that you have. That can definitely also play into your exploration factor as well. So I think exploring early on is really important, especially if we're advocating for folks to take charge of their transition early on anyway, right? We talk about 18 months, even up to 24 months. So I think that's a really key piece. And then as you inch throughout that transition process, your priorities, right? You might not be in necessarily an exploration phase, but you're moving into a different phase within that timeline. So I think it's really important to get that started early on and get yourself out there, explore, learn more about other industries and pathways.
So both of you are in like the talent acquisition space, and so just tell me how you would feel if someone were to reach out to you, maybe someone who is in the process of preparing for their transition, and they reached out to you, Donald, and they were like, "Hey, would you mind telling me what it's like to work at Intel?" Or, "Hey, Charlie, would you mind telling me what it's like to be a talent acquisition professional?" Like, how would you as veterans respond to that? Like, why don't you tell me, Donald, what would you say about that?
Well, first of all, having a good understanding of what the end-to-end process in recruiting is really important because not every organization manages that process the same. So, in the scenario that I'm in at Intel, I'm a talent advisor, still a recruiter, but I'm
Yeah.
a talent advisor. So I'm really the link between the manager, the requisition, and all the processes in between. So I'm not doing any sourcing, I'm not doing any coordinating. I'm really managing the stakeholder and making sure that they are able to get what they need. So it's understanding what an organization may be able to provide you from a talent perspective in terms of being a professional. But that being said, that doesn't come without doing those informational interviews. So if somebody reached out to me and asked that question, I'd say, hey, let's get together. Let's spend 30 minutes to an hour. Let me answer the questions that you have. Let me share the knowledge that I have with you. And then I'm going to encourage you to reach out to more talent acquisition professionals. Again, just trying to narrow down that focus of what you want to do. And those informational interviews gain you that knowledge that will help you make that decision. And as you said, Lori, that should be early. If you can start that process 24 months prior to separation, retirement, whatever it may be. And I know we don't always have the luxury of time, but just the same, doing that early and doing it often is going to prepare you. I did not do that. So I'm speaking from my own experience. I had no idea what I was getting into. And I just found myself in the right situation at the right time, at the right place with the right company. And it's been wonderful.
And you make a really good point. Like, if you're a month out, 2 weeks out, you don't really have time to do exploration, right? And that's why we do all advocate for starting so far out. Like, it's never too early to start planning, and that gives you the luxury of time to explore and research and make decisions. But if you find yourself with a shorter timeline, what I always tell people is you're not signing another contract. You're not enlisting again. You're not commissioning to be an officer. It's not a permanent sentence. Like, say you took this position as a talent advisor with Intel, and you weren't happy with it, you could leave, right? And so sometimes we have to make a decision and move in a direction, but knowing that that may not be our forever, and that's okay. You're still gaining experience, knowledge, you're integrating into the private sector in that way, right? So, okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you for that. Do you want to tell us your first lesson, Dawn? You want to share that with us?
I'd like to kind of just follow on what Charlie was saying in terms of, the focus areas. One of the challenges that I had when I was transitioning was I was just filled with a lot of self-doubt. I've had multiple fields that I've been uh, an individual contributor in, as well as a manager and leader. So I really didn't know what direction I wanted to go. So, I think, well, my most recent job is operations manager. So let me go in that direction. And Charlie kind of hit the nail on the head. Just because I have skills in that particular area doesn't mean that that's the direction I should go or that's the direction that I need to go. And it was very interesting as I started to float my resume. I started getting feedback about recruiting, and I didn't want necessarily to go on recruiting. And I was like, I just want to be an operations manager because that's what I've been doing, right? And that's what I'm comfortable with. And that limited that level of self doubt that I had. So when we think about that, for me, it's just what is it that I plan to do? When do I plan to do it? How do I develop a network to support me as I'm going through that process and all those phases? Because it's actually like the stages of grief when you're going through retirement. So it can be a little bit challenging. And then making sure throughout that entire process that you're just doing lots of research. Don't overwhelm yourself, but try to narrow it down to a few different areas that you could see yourself as a good fit for any company where you can help them improve their bottom line, where you can support employees, where you can support yourself as an individual contributor. Those are the key things for me in terms of focus. But my number one thing of all in terms of preparing for separation or retirement is making sure you're financially prepared. That's the biggest one. I know that, for me, I was very fortunate. We had recently sold a house. We had a good amount of money in the bank. So as we prepared for that transition, the most important thing for me was that financial security, because I didn't want to impact my family negatively as I was making that transition. So, what a lot of these financial experts say is, have 6 months worth of savings. So we were prepared for that even before we sold the house. But it's just a matter of making sure that you're ready to take that next step, because I talk to a lot of young folks that they have car payments and they have more than one, and they have a house payment, or they're paying rent, and then they have credit cards. I feel very fortunate that I left without any of that, and all I had was a house payment until I sold the house. But being financially prepared takes so much weight off your shoulders, especially for those that are transitioning that have a family. So that would be like my number one thing to anybody, is just make sure that you're financially prepared to make that transition.
You make a good point. Like, being financially prepared means different things to different people. And so it is, if you're single, if you're married, if you have kids, if you have house payment, car payment, whatever the case may be. Like, and I really feel like, nobody really talks about putting your salary needs into the decision-making process, but it's very important, isn't it? Like, you have to be able to financially get by. And so you could say, like, I need to make $95,000 and I really want to be a preschool teacher. And those two things just don't go together, right? They should. Let me tell you, a preschool teacher should make way more than that. But, realistically, that's not going to happen. And so you really got to take that into consideration. And you're right, having that kind of cushion, if you will, takes that desperation off of your shoulders, doesn't it? Like, there's a difference when you're like, yeah, I'm going to be okay for the next year. Even if I don't get a job, I want a job, but I don't need a job. And then you can be a little bit more choosy, for lack of a better word, right? So
Yeah, absolutely. And I felt good about that because I had turned down a couple opportunities. And I was, in the middle of three separate interviews, three different companies. And I was feeling good that I had the choice and I wasn't out there desperate, just trying to find something to make ends meet.
yeah. I want to bring up a comment. And by the way, like, we want this to be an interactive process. You know, the three of us are used to doing this in front of a live audience, so we want you to ask us questions. And so I want to show Julian's comment, and he talks about, you know, like, his focus is everywhere, and he's out trying to get certifications in everything, right? And not necessarily related certifications. And if someone were to come to you as a candidate, just kind of speaking from your recruiting HR experience, and they had kind of loaded their resume with unrelated certifications, like, how would you see that person as a candidate? Now, I want to preface this by saying, like, going out and getting education and certifications, especially if you're not having to pay for it, is a great way of exploring and looking at different options. But I just want to see what your thoughts are of having too many different things going.
I think, and I'll jump in here, right? I think sometimes as we transition out, and this was something that I thought of myself, how much juice can I squeeze on my way out, right? How many benefits am I losing out on in regards to education that I didn't take advantage of before, especially those of us who are transitioning relatively quickly or haven't been in as long? What can I do? I'm going to lose tuition assistance. I'm going to lose my cool program, right? In regards to getting all these certifications. So that was my mentality. And at one point I reflected on myself. I'm like, I can't do all of this at the same time. I need to find my focus, and I need to spread it out a little bit more efficiently to then get to that end result that I'm also longing for, right? And when I thought about this too, as you guys were talking, it took me in the direction of really reflecting on that experience that I had and understanding that I couldn't do it all. And having all these certifications on my resume would be absolutely fantastic, right? Picture perfect world. Now, as a talent acquisition professional, I'm seeing that some of these certifications are absolutely fantastic. Are they essential to doing the role? Depends on exactly what the role that you're wanting to do is, which takes us down into the exploration phase, right? Is if you're exploring and you understand exactly what a role is absolutely required to have versus preferred to have, it can really open up the game. And I've even had some hiring teams that are okay with getting that certification for that candidate if they really want to invest in that specific person that much because they really do believe in what they can bring to the table. It's fantastic to have. I don't necessarily think it's the ultimate showstopper. I'm not sure if you guys have anything different to throw in there.
Yeah, you want to throw in your thoughts, Don?
Yeah, I completely agree. You know, especially for those of us who've been in the military, can be 5 years, can be 20 years. You know, you gain a lot of skill through that process. And it's just a matter of understanding what skills that you do have and that you bring, because you have the skills that would come from a certification, but you don't necessarily have that certification. So how does that resume reflect when you're going through that process of submitting for different jobs? And it's not just about tailoring to the job, but it's understanding what's probably going to be of most interest to that individual, whether it's a recruiter or a hiring manager that might be looking at your resume to make that determination of whether or not you're a good fit. For me, a lot of times, one of the first things I look at is whether or not they meet the minimum requirements, right? So I want to know that you have the basics. Do you have a degree? Sometimes that's all they're looking for. So do you have the degree? Do you have the 2+ years of experience? And sometimes it's a little bit challenging for us because sometimes we have 20 years of experience and now we look like we're overqualified. For me as a recruiter, it's a little bit different because I'd like to focus my attention a little bit different in terms of, hey, let's just have a conversation with the candidate and determine, you know, what they're looking for, because they could be looking to take a step back, or, you know, they could be looking for future opportunities and they're just looking to get their foot in the door. But when you talk about a resume that's just full, you know, 3-4 pages, every single experience of their military career, a lot of times I set that to the side, but I will normally send them a response and just say, you know, hey, whomever you are, listen, please take some time to kind of tailor this down a little bit more, because when I saw it, it was a turnoff to me, and I'm not going to read 5 pages of a resume because I don't have that amount of time. I'm going to probably spend, you know, maybe 10 or 15 seconds on each, you know, main bullet point. So, if you say you worked for the Air Force from 2015 to 2020, I'm looking at like your top 2 or 3, seeing if it jives with what we're looking for, and then I'm moving on to the next one. And I'm just going to give it a quick view. I don't need 20 years of experience. I need maybe the past 5 to 7 at best, depending upon what your skill set looks like. So for me, just really tailoring, getting to that 1 page, 2 page resume, make sure it's applicable to the job. I'm not really worried about anyone tailoring to necessarily all the words that are in the job posting. A lot of people have a misconception that your resume never makes through the ATS. I promise you, there's very few that don't make it through the ATS. I've seen some people that, not one skill on their resume applies to the job and they still make it through the ATS. And it's up to us to go through those resumes and just make sure that you're a good fit for the role before we pass you on to the hiring manager to actually go forward with an interview. So.
Yeah, and so kind of like directly addressing Julian, and I saw your comment, Julian, about maybe sharing some of your background to get some feedback. We would be happy to do that. If I could bring you up on stage, I would. We just don't have the ability to do that right now. But yeah, feel free to share some more information in the comments. And I don't, my intention wasn't to like single you out. I just want you to really think about that focus, right? And that knowing that, like I said earlier, you don't have to go in one direction and stay there for the rest of your career. Like the average adult is going to change careers, not jobs, but careers between 7 and 9 times in their life. And so you can make changes. And I appreciate that you're doing a lot of exploration. But I don't want you to have your fingers in so many different places and your focus in so many different places. And I don't want them all to be in your resume, because just like, when we try to write a resume that appeals to everyone, it ends up appealing to no one. And so you come across as what jack of all trades, right? And what comes next is, we don't want anyone to think we're the master of no trade, right? So your military career was likely very diverse as well. And so just, you can even pick and choose from your military career what you want to highlight. So I think that, I wanted to get the HR focus or viewpoint on your issue, just so that we can really help you in the best way possible. So I will take a minute and read through your situation in the comments, Julian, and I promise we will get back to you. So I want to go on to kind of my next lesson that I want to share with you. And that is that you need to be very proactive and you need to be very prepared, right? And so it's time now for you to get selfish. And I know that that's not how you're made. You are a selfless servant leader. That's why you joined the military in the first place, right? But the military will roll on without you. It will carry on, and they are going to miss you, but they will carry on without you. And so you've got to take proactive action with getting yourself prepared. It's time to be a little bit selfish and really be willing to step away and say, okay, the military is going to move on without me. Now I need to focus on myself. In the episode that is getting released tonight at midnight, the launch episode for season 3, I talked with my guest about a colleague of his that loved what he was doing so much. He told him once that he would do it even if the military wasn't paying him. He loved his job, and he worked until hours before his retirement. Literally was working, doing his job, and didn't even think about his transition. And he really struggled. And so I don't want that for you. I want you to be proactive, to be prepared, to take the time to think about, do your research, go out and look at the career field, to do informational interviews, to call the Dons and the Charlies of the world and say, can I just have 5 minutes of your time to talk to you about what it's like to be a recruiter in the corporate world? Just to reach out to people that you meet on LinkedIn and say, hey, can you just give me a little bit of insight? Can you give me some advice? Like, take that time for yourself, because the military will roll on without you. And I know that you've got responsibilities and you've got tasks that you have to do and you've got people to take care of. But you've got to start offloading some of that so that you can focus on yourself, so that, you really can be prepared with a resume that's focused and targeted and all your military skills are translated, a LinkedIn profile, and a robust network that you can tap into when you need it. That you're really getting yourself mentally prepared for the transition as well. Transition is so much more than just getting a job, right? I see Chris Dreisbach, my friend, in the comments, and he and I have talked about this a lot. He was like, oh, check the box. He was one of my guests in season 1 and season 2, and I'm sure he'll be back in season 3. Got a job, checked the box, and I'm done. My transition is over. And I think he will be the first one to tell you that that is not the case. And so it is a process, and I want you to take the time and give it the attention and just be a little bit selfish, be a little bit, I want you to be selfish at this point, right? It's time for you to take action. So anything you want to add to that, Don?
Yeah, I was reading the comment by Julian, and just to give him a little bit of confidence, when I started that process, I was deployed during COVID. I came back. I got back in 2020, June of 2020, and I just had a great deployment. It wasn't a great experience, but it was good deployment. And the transition back, I said, well, I'm going to take a shot at E9 and kind of see what happens. So I really held all my cards until that point. So when the results came out, I had already signed up for TAPS, but I had done that during COVID. So they were so backlogged that I couldn't get into TAPS for, I think it was 7 or 8 months after I had signed up in June, as soon as I got back. And not knowing that I was going to run into that situation while I was deployed, I kind of hindered myself. So when I finally got back and I did that, I waited, and then I didn't get into TAPS until I think it was March of 2021, and I was slated to actually separate on June 17th of 2021. So my window was really tight. So what I would say is, if you just maintain your focus and really just put everything you have into making that transition and finding resources. That was one of the main things that I needed as I transitioned. And just to give everybody a little secret, like, Lori was so helpful to me, because my LinkedIn page, my resume, like, I had a friend that had worked with her who was already down here in Arizona, knew I was coming here. And I said, hey, do you have any recommendations of people I should hook up with? He's like, reach out to Lori. She's a great resource. She's well connected. She's really going to help you through the process. And I was like, oh, fantastic. So I reached out to Lori, and she's on it. She's helping me with my resume. She's helping me with my LinkedIn. And honestly, like, if it wasn't for her, my transition would have been that much harder. There are free resources out there that you can use, but my timeline was so restricted and I felt so overwhelmed that I had to make that decision, because I was paying for my future, right? Like, and not that, by no means is Lori expensive or anything like that, but I'm paying for a product, and it's just, she's able to, like, see me, interview me, everything that I've done, and able to effectively put that down on paper. And then it was like, boom, the light bulb turned on, and I was like, wow, okay, this is me. Right. And it was an interesting process, but don't get down on yourself. Don't worry too much about the timeline. Just make sure you're focused on that transition, knowing when that date is, and doing everything you can to be prepared for that day when you are walking away, or in your case, through that process of the MEB, just being ready and utilizing the resources that are available to you out there. But just make sure you get some feedback on those resources by somebody else who's used them. Don't just jump in and pay for services from anybody.
It's like the situation that you described on of having like a really shortened timeline, and just like what Julian's mentioned in the comments. Basically, Julian's story is he got medical procedures and got med boarded out, and now he has only 5 to 7 months, and he planned on doing, another 12 years in the military. And so the one thing that I'll say is we always should be ready. We should always be ready to make a transition in our career. And that's like, I'm really passionate about talking about this to all service members. Like, even if you're at 4 years and you're like, I want to do 25 years, I want to do as long as I can go in the military, I really love it. You should still be planning for your career, because, like Herb Thompson in his book says, God willing, we will all transition out of the military. And so it is coming. It may be coming in 20 years. It may be coming as a surprise, like what happened with Julian. And so I want you to be ready, proactively prepared for that. Start your planning process. Like, you should be on LinkedIn years before you're ready to transition. You should start thinking about the future of your career years before it's time. I think early in season 1, I had Greg Austin on. And if you want to talk to somebody who's like very meticulous about planning, Greg laid out how he planned his transition for, I think it was 13 years. And so he's one of the biggest, longest term planners that I've had on the show, but he's got a lot of great information about that. And I want to just speak to Julian specifically because of the situation that he's facing. He can't lift anymore. He's an aviation maintainer. Been in for 13 years. I'm going to guess that you've kind of progressed from like probably a crew chief to, now you're more probably a team leader or even a section chief, or, I'm guessing your Air Force. I don't know. But, again, I know you're probably in more of a leadership role now. You can't necessarily turn a wrench or lift anymore. There are so many skills that you come out of the military with, whether it's leadership, you've got like supply chain planning and management, you've got some project leadership and planning skills. As being in aviation maintenance, you've got safety experience. You've got environmental management. So there are so many other things that you can do, and it doesn't have to be in aviation. You don't have to go back to turning wrenches because that's what you were trained in the military. You can take the skills that you learned in the military and you can take them so many places. So please, you're the quality control NCOIC. Okay, got it. I see that in the comments. So, gosh, you don't have to be able to turn a wrench to be quality assurance. You don't have to be able to lift to go out and inspect quality of anything. Like, there's quality control, in like a grocery warehouse, right? There's, as Chris could tell us, right? So I think that there are so many places out there for you, and you just got to figure out what's next for you. You don't have to figure out what's forever. You just have to figure out what's next so that you can get the certifications that are most important for that direction, and you can assess the transferable skills that you have to help get you there. Okay. So please reach out to me, Julian, if there's anything that I can do to help you. Okay. Sorry, we took a turn, but I really want to help Julian because the situation that you're facing stinks.
This is how it all happens, right?
Yeah.
The awesome conversations just start to flow, and it just keeps going.
That's right. So thank you guys for that. I can't even remember whose turn it is to give a lesson. Who's got one for me?
It's Charlie.
I think we
Charlie?
all.
Charlie's up.
All right.
Okay.
All right, Charlie, you're up.
So we talked about exploration a little bit, right? But we talked about exploration a little bit more. So role, industry focus, finding out what you want to do. My next point kind of brings me into self-reflecting and understanding your skill sets, right? And oftentimes we talk a lot about your hard skills and your soft skills. A lot of folks don't necessarily understand what soft skills still are, even though there's a lot of resources out there. It's been mentioned plenty of times, has a lot to do with resume writing, but understanding soft skills and the concept of it, then applying that to yourself and understanding what are my most useful soft skills? What have I done the most? What am I the best at? What drives me? Which of those soft skills do I truly enjoy the most? Which one do I think is, my top tier, right? Understanding those soft skills, I think can really shape the path of not only exploration, but everything else that might trickle down into your transition and where that can lead you moving forward during that entire process. So this even also will help with the resume writing, right? And even understanding going through informational interviews, formal interviews, could even be casual exploration conversations, right? Sometimes I have those with my hiring teams at times. But understanding yourself and being able to understand how to maximize that through a conversation, through an example, through relating back to an experience or anything like that, I think is really important. There's so many skills that we end up developing and we're able to have hands-on or able to do a specific kind of training or go to a specific location or hold a specific position that really is very selective, where nobody really gets the chance to do that. But really understanding yourself and what are those soft skills that are the most important to you and the things that you're the best at, I think would definitely help in that transition and just understanding yourself, right? In a different capacity. When do we take the time to self-reflect on our soft skills while we're in? Do we? I don't know. I can't say that I ever did myself and I understood really what I was good at. I just thought, hey, maybe I'm just hardwired the way that I think I'm made out to be, and this is my personality type, and it is what it is, and leave it there. Not necessarily. Let's take it a step further and really understand those soft skills and self-reflect and understand how to showcase those, right? Through resume writing, through interviewing skills, through communication efforts, the whole nine. So that brings me into, my next point.
So you're both Air Force, right? So the Air Force asked both of you, like, what makes you happy, right? They asked you that question before they sent you places, didn't they? That's how it works in the military, right? No. So I think sometimes this is a very foreign concept to people, right? It's like, oh wait, I get to think about what makes me happy, what I like to do. And like, this is the beautiful thing is often people always say like, oh, I feel really overwhelmed. I don't know what to choose. There's too many choices. And I say, let's flip the script and say, how exciting. I get to choose whatever I want to do. And so like change the way you think of that process. And I think your mindset will change very much, right? So you get to do what makes you happy. And like it's great if we can bring all of those concentric circles together that I talked about earlier. But finding a way to integrate them all together into the next best thing. And so I would say I totally agree with you, Charlie, on soft skills. And people are often going to tell you like, oh, soft skills don't matter. Employers don't care about those soft skills. But I would argue that it's soft skills that separate two candidates from each other, right? So it's the soft skills that if you take two people that are equally qualified on paper, that are equally educated, have equal experience, you're going to pick between those two candidates because of their soft skills, correct?
That's the route that I'm more than likely inclined towards, right? As a TA professional, and if I were to put myself in the shoes of a hiring team, absolutely.
Yeah. How about you, Don?
Yeah, same here. Yeah, same here. I want somebody who's going to be a good fit on the team, minus skills, versus somebody who's not a good fit on the team with a plethora of skills. If you're not a good fit, it can really impact the overall team dynamics. So definitely the soft skills really do come into play in any role that you're applying for.
I would recommend like interweaving your soft skills, your communication, your leadership style, your building a collaborative team, interweave those skills with your hard skills, right? Like you can talk about what your team accomplished and interweave like the soft skills that you use to help the team get there. Still give measurable accomplishments, but just include your soft skills in with your hard skill examples and accomplishments on your resume and LinkedIn.
Yeah, and I think too another point to this is understanding that I had a great supervisor at one point during my career that mentioned just going through a resume, right, and looking at it and seeing the skill sets and vocalizing, I can teach this, I can teach that, I can teach this. Here's what I can't teach. Here's what I can't develop, and here's what comes naturally from the individual, like the effective communication, like the personality types, the good fits, the EQ that we all hone in on, right? So sometimes I try to think about it in that sense too, right? What is teachable and what is not? What is it that you bring to the table that's really unteachable?
That is a great point. I didn't even think about it that way, but you're right. Like you can teach those hard skills oftentimes. Like, you're not going to be able to walk in and be a doctor
Sure.
because you're really good, right? Or even maintain an aircraft because you're a team player. But those, I can hone your hard skills as long as I feel like you're going to be a value and a benefit to the team. You're a good addition to like our team dynamic versus if you're exceptionally skilled, but you bring the whole team down, that's not going to work out so good. So I think that's a great point. Donald, do you have another one for us? Do you have another lesson that you brought?
Yeah, I mean, kind of my thought after the fact when I was going through the process was, you know, to plan, to act, and to pivot, right? So you have to plan for what's coming, and then you have to act on opportunities quickly, but also you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. I kind of learned that the hard way. I was thinking to myself, I'm going to get a skill bridge and it's going to be a smooth transition, which it was not. And I focused so much on that I failed to focus in other areas in terms of just spreading out my resume to more organizations. And then I was only looking at large organizations and not looking at small organizations. So that impacted the job hunt as well. And then the key to this is just pivoting continuously. You constantly have to pivot out here. Like right now, for instance, yeah, it's great. Looks smooth when you look at my transition out, which it wasn't. But I'm in a point of transition again. Intel is getting ready to do layoffs. I'm going to be impacted by that. And that's okay. Like I'm comfortable with where I'm at. I'm good in my skin. I know I can find another position someplace. There's tons of jobs available, as both Charlie and I have said. So like when you think about that, you're constantly having to pivot, especially during the initial transition. So as that's happening, just make sure that you're doing those things that can help you pivot too. Updating and tailoring your resume. Trying to gain new skills. Don't get overwhelmed with it. Pick one and go for it, but don't try to do 5 different certifications at once, and then try to gain a good understanding of the market, because not everything is secure out here. And not only that, I found myself in a situation where I did great on the interview. I'm on interview number 3, and I'm thinking I'm going to get an offer. It goes really well, and they pick somebody else instead of me, and that was almost 2 months. So now, if I'm not spreading all those eggs out, now I'm in a situation where, okay, I put all my eggs in this basket. Now it's like back to square one, starting over. So pivoting and just making sure that you're planning appropriately is going to be huge.
Okay. I was not aware of that, Don. Let me know how I can help you with that process. So
No, listen, it's good. Like I said, I'm in a great place. I'm super happy. Like I love the job. I'd love to stay with Intel. There might be some opportunities there. But right now, the tech industry is losing a lot of people and a lot of good people. And there's really not too much we can do about that, except once again, act, and pivot.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to put kind of one other call out there for questions, comments. If there's anything the 3 of us can answer for you, please throw it in the comments and we'll try to get to it. If not, I will come back and answer questions later, since I can't interact with you all on LinkedIn right now. So I have one last one, maybe 2 if I can sneak in a second one. But the one I'm going to tell you is I don't want you to do this alone. We've got some people in the comments that are transitioning. They're preparing to transition. We have some people in the comments that I know that have already transitioned and maybe are looking for something new or different. We'll add Dawn to that mix too. And so don't do this alone. Like you don't have to. There's no reason for you to do it alone. Like, what I think is kind of beautiful is I'm watching the comments go by. Like, Julian has already connected with 2 other veterans who have offered to help him and brainstorm with them. And so you're making those connections. Like, find mentors, seek out the resources that can help you. That's why I created the Lessons Learned for Vets podcast, is to serve as that resource, to provide that guidance and information. So if you haven't listened to any episodes, I'll tell you there's 102 episodes already out there. So please go out and check it out. And episode 103 will be out tonight at midnight. So, but again, I just want you to be willing to admit, like, I don't know the answers, and reach out your hand and ask for help. As I've already seen it happening in the comments, kind of live. So that's kind of my last one. If I could sneak in one more, I probably will. But Charlie, you have one last thought you want to leave everybody with?
Yeah, I think the first thing, based off of your point, is that this military community that we call a military community in general, I think is just arguably the best one out there, right? We're always open to talking to one another, helping each other out. Oftentimes, as we transition, that's really all that we want to focus on. So I think you're in the right place when it comes to, leaning on one another and not feeling like you're alone through the entire process. With my last point, I think it kind of flows into the other two, right? The first one we talked about was exploration focused. Then the second one that we talked about was more reflection focused on yourself after you've done your exploration. Now let's get a little bit more specific. Once you identify your industry, your roles that you think are best suited for you, after you've done your exploration, you understand your soft skills, how to use them and showcase them and understand yourself. How do you put yourself in a good position to then understand that realm? Well, that's where I challenge folks, and that's my third point, is to learn new languages in regards to your preferred industry, right? The direction that you want to go in. Oftentimes we talk about military jargon and the fact that we have our own language. All of these other industries and all of these other professions have the exact same thing. And what are we trying to do as we transition out? We're both speaking different languages. However, there's a lot more folks that probably need to learn one end of that language than vice versa, right? There's so many of us, and not necessarily as much happening the opposite way around coming towards us. So when it comes to that, my recommendation and last tip is to really focus on trying to learn new languages, right? And we can, use examples like military HR. That was my bread and butter within the Air Force as my entire career as active duty. And yes, there's crossover. Trust me, there is crossover, and there's plenty of skill sets and concepts that you can relate to. But boy, did it take me a while to figure out exactly how I can understand that, talk about it, relate it, and then pinpoint exactly what concept related to what in the civilian HR sense, right? That's an entire process. The sooner that you do that, I think your transition might go a lot smoother in regards to identifying potential roles that are a good fit for you, compared to maybe not spending as much time in regards to doing that for yourself. And we can take so many different career fields into consideration, like ammo and like what we would call comm, right? Going to IT and just different things that we focus on. And that's our bread and butter and our experience in, and what we're trying to get into in the civilian sector. So I think that would really help a lot of industries and a lot of fields. And my specific example, right, is military HR. And that's just one of them, but there's so many. I thought about this one in our last event, and I thought this one was too good to keep. So it's really been a helpful one for me moving forward.
It's like you set me up with the last one that I wanted to say. I get to sneak in a fourth one. Is like, it is your job to make sure your target audience, your potential employer, understands what you're talking about. You can't expect them to adapt to you and learn your language, right? And so if you had called yourself a personnelist on your resume, which is what you were in the Air Force, then they would have said, I don't even know what that means, right? And so you adapted your language. You told them what you did in the military as it related to where you were going, right? And so, like, I always say, like, if you come out of the military and you expect everyone to adapt to you, in your language, it would be like going to a country that doesn't speak English and you get off the plane and you say, I'm here. Everyone needs to speak English now. And you don't do that, right? Hopefully not. Hopefully you're not one of those Americans, right? But it is. So I want you to adapt and learn their language. And I think that's such a great point, Charlie. Thank you for that. Don, you have one last thought you want to leave us with before we end up here?
Sure. I would say, and I was taking notes, Charlie, spot on in terms of like that transition and understanding the lingo and being able to tie those two things together. But one, don't be afraid to take a step back in order to take some steps forward. Meaning, when I first retired and I was looking at operations managers positions, I was looking for an HR business partner role because that's what my degree's in, but who wants to hire me as an HR business partner when I can't even tell you what someone in the HR industry would do in the civilian sector, you know what I mean, or the private sector. So that was tough for me. But don't be afraid to take a role as an HR assistant to get to the point of being an HR business partner. And when you're doing your interviews, and I see this more than I'd like to, but be authentic, be yourself, right? Because if you're not yourself, when you get on the job and you start working and now this different personality is coming through, it doesn't set you up for long-term success, in my opinion. So, and most importantly, and this is just for me, and this is my opinion, you have worked your tail off in the military for 4 years, 20 years, 30 years, or whatever it may be. Focus on work-life balance. You deserve it. Like, you deserve to have time for yourself, time for your family, and life should not just be about work and money. It should be about balance.
Beautifully said. I think that's the perfect place for us to end today. Thank you for those of you that tuned in today to our very first Lessons Learned from Military Transition. Thank you to Charlie and Dawn for trusting me enough to come on live with me and try this experiment. Thanks to Jeannie for being behind the scenes. She wouldn't come on camera with us, but thank you for being back there, running everything for me. And thanks to all of you for your support. Check out the podcast that's dropping tomorrow or tonight at midnight. And let me know what you think of this as a monthly session. We would love to hear from you. And if you'd like to join me someday live. It wasn't too scary, was it, guys?
Right? Not too bad.
Not too bad. Not too bad. Just a little bit.
No, just a teeny scary, but we made it. I can't think of anything major that went wrong, so we're good. Thanks for listening. Talk to you guys later.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye,
Lori.
Bye, Charlie. Bye, everyone. Thanks so much.
Bye.